you've been busy this week. You've written about 6 pieces. I don't know where you find the time to sleep. But one of those pieces was for the New York Post about what Trump hopes to achieve in his first 100 days in office for his second term. We know he's all about America first. That's the agenda. But what do you expect to see in terms of the war in Ukraine and the war between Hamas and Israel?
Well, from a foreign policy perspective, I think Donald Trump is going to prioritize finding an off-ramp for both Vladimir Zelenskyy and Vladimir Putin when it comes to the Russia-Ukraine war. Look, he has said in the past that he is going to get this deal done in one day. I'm not entirely sure that is going to happen, but I think it actually is going to happen sooner rather than later. The difference between Donald Trump and Western leaders writ large when it comes to the Russia-Ukraine conflict is that Donald Trump, as a businessman, understands a certain thing called leverage. And he understands that when you incentivize Vladimir Zelenskyy and you communicate to him that the entire West is going to arm Ukraine to the brink unless and until they recover every single square inch of territory, that's not exactly sending the right incentives to wind down this conflict. But Donald Trump is a pragmatist. He's a realist. I think he's going to find a way to get an end to this conflict sooner rather than later, probably in the first 100 to 200 days at the absolute most, possibly even sooner than that, when it comes to an off-ramp that can be ultimately taken back to be politically palatable for both Putin and Zelenskyy. When it comes to the conflict in Israel, I think Donald Trump is basically just going to tell Bibi Netanyahu, do what has to be done to wrap this thing up sooner rather than later when it comes to both Hamas in Gaza as well as Hezbollah in Lebanon. The Iranian piece of the puzzle is a little bit more complicated, of course. That's not going to happen overnight there. But all indications that I've seen thus far are that Donald Trump is going to put back into place all of the maximum pressure campaign tactics that he had against the Iranian regime the first time, including the sanctions on oil exports. Really, it's the lapse of those sanctions that the Biden-Harris administration has put into place that have funded the regime, that have led them to sow the seeds of jihadist chaos throughout the region these past 4 years. I think we're going to see a very similar Iran policy that Donald Trump had the first time around, and that was a very good policy, so I hope it to be the case as well.
Now, before you go, I mentioned at the top of the show that you predicted Donald Trump would win every single swing state. I don't think anybody else was that confident about that. You said it was not going to be close. Ignore the polls. It was going to be a landslide. You were right about that, and you've been saying it for some time. So the question is, why were the pollsters, the overwhelming majority of them, so wrong? How do they keep getting it wrong? How are they not losing all credibility? We had one pollster suggest that Iowa was up for grabs for the Democrats, and Trump ended up winning it by 13-14%.
Yeah, and by the way, that pollster in Iowa, her name is Ann Seltzer. She's the chief pollster for the Des Moines Register, the biggest newspaper in Iowa. You know, she's considered to be the gold standard of Iowa pollsters. In fact, in the first in the nation Iowa caucuses, it's the final Ann Seltzer poll that traditionally has been looked to as an actual projection. So, you know, even the pollsters here in America that are considered to be the best of the best, the point that I'm making, have been just totally botching the Trump phenomenon, frankly, since the get-go. And I actually think, Rita, and the reason that I was able to predict, I think, the fact that Donald Trump would sweep all 7 of the swing states across the Sun Belt and the Great Lakes area, the reason is fairly simple, and it's structural and methodological, is that the pollsters thus far have still not found a way to tap into the low propensity Trump voter.
Josh Hammer, thanks for your time.